This is a 60-second take of a drawing I did a week and a half ago for a video, and while I thought it was okay to use for the video, to be honest, I wasn't happy with how it turned out. I didn't feel I captured the qualities of the scene that I was wanting to capture as effectively as I'd hoped to. So I thought this was a great opportunity for me to put to the test advice I often give, which is if we're not happy with a drawing, if we redraw it as soon as possible, it gives us a great chance to focus on the things we're not happy with, but also to build on the observation and the things that we have done that we were happy with. So in a moment, I will redraw this, and when I redraw it, I'll focus more on the things that I wasn't happy with and how I'm changing my second drawing to accommodate them. And at the end, we'll compare the two and we'll see, was it worth the redraw? Did I learn from taking my advice and doing it a second time? Let's see. I've actually redrawn from the same reference photo a number of times, quite a number of times in fact, but that's because I've wanted to be redrawing it for a different purpose or for another video or as part of something a bit different to how it was first done. But that's where I noticed how much easier it was to draw the second, the third time. That there really was a head start because I was so much more focused, and that was the source of the advice that I've given to as a learning experience. If we're not happy with a drawing, if we redraw it as soon as we can, just see if we can't do it better, because there's every chance that we will. And the more drawings we do which please us, which achieve what we have in our mind when we start to draw, then the more our drawing will improve. But this is the first time I've redrawn a drawing because I've been unhappy with the way it turned out and really felt that I should have been able to do better, that I had a very firm picture in my head of what I was wanting. So if you get a bit impatient with my redrawing it a second time and you skip ahead, can I ask you though to please go to the end where I show the two drawings side by side, because I'd love you to leave a comment telling me which one you think works better as a drawing, as a standalone drawing. You don't have to refer it back to the photo, but as a drawing with a sense of place, a sense of form, a sense of depth, which one you think works the best. I'd really love you to leave a comment and say whether it was the first one that you've just seen or the second one which I'm drawing now. But both drawings took me pretty much the same amount of time. They both took me around 60 minutes. So a better drawing is not necessarily one that takes us longer to draw. It's all to do with what we're doing in that time. We can place virtually the same number of marks with our pen on the paper, but it's not so much that, but where we place them and how we place them that creates the effect that we're wanting. We're not drawing shapes, we're not outlining trees and bushes, we're creating an effect of trees and bushes, of the ground, of that rock in the foreground, of the trees in the far distance, combining them all together to create the effect that we have in our reference, or the effect that's inspired within us from our reference that we want to perhaps change in some way or take further in our drawing. We should never be limited by our reference. And look, if you think this is an interesting topic, I mean, you're still watching it now, so I assume you do, then please, why don't you hit the like button right now while you're watching, and then at the end, you can leave a comment telling me which one you preferred. I really would be interested in knowing. I certainly have a strong opinion myself about that, which I'll tell you at the end when you can see them. There's a lot of just creating effect with foliage because there's not really much outline of any individual thing we can do. We can do lines to outline the trees, but you'll notice that certainly for the trunks that I avoid long continuous lines because I find visually they create a flattening effect to use for trees. And very seldom are the outlines of trees completely smooth. And if they are, still the effect of light bouncing off the roundedness doesn't usually create a heavy black line. In fact, often, as we see here, we see the trees from the shadows that come in around them or are created on them. Now, I'm going to talk at the end when we see them side by side more about the differences that I'm trying to bring out in this drawing. And one of the things, if you've seen the other video, which was on the 9th of February 2024, if you want to go back and have a look at that. But one of the big differences, besides how I place the marks, where I place them, and the effect I created, was I went from using one pen, a 0.3mm pen, to 3 different pens. A 0.3 for the kind of foreground and the front 2 trees and just those very immediate shrubs. A 0.2 for most of the midground, and then a 0.1 for really the trees in the top third of the background and higher up in the canopy further back. Now, 60 minutes for the amount of detail that we have here. In some ways, this is still a sketch. I'm not going into too much detail. It's more capturing the effect at a glance. I could still sit in the bush for an hour, and if I had a comfy spot to sit, I could draw this in this way as an achievable technique for time, for the place, and for a result that I was going to be happy with. The most important thing when we draw scenes like this is to create distinction. It's easy to get totally lost. The dangers are either we don't put enough marks on the paper to create an effect, and so it does look undercooked. It does look a bit cartoon-like. We don't create a three-dimensional real feel in the effect. It looks a bit more like we've just used symbols for different objects. But then the other problem is that we get tangled up in lines. We do so many lines, and particularly if they're, can I say, scribble lines, where we go back and forth or round and round without taking the pen off the paper. We should very rarely do that. I can't remember a time where what I was drawing required me to do what looked like a scribble. Every line, even if they're quick and closely placed, should be with intention, where it starts, where it ends, and how much pressure we put, what effect we're trying to create from it. These leaves that I'm drawing just now aren't actually in the reference. I did these in my original drawing, and they're to bring the depth of plane much closer to us, because visually we start to read depth from the closest object. And while down at the base of the photo, the bottom of the photo, there is a rock ledge there, so that's okay. But at the top there's nothing. By having these leaves come forward to imitate leaves or to represent leaves from branches that are coming out towards us some way, or coming across from perhaps a tree off to the side, left or right, the depth of plane starts much closer. Therefore, by the time we get back to those closest trees, we've already gone back some way. And when we go back behind those trees, we're going back even further. And so we hugely increase the sense of moving from close to midground to distance to far distance, which is something that I want. But the challenge is to create distinction between these levels. And what I find helpful is to, almost like I was designing a drama set, a play stage set, to have a foreground, a midground, and a distance. And by doing that, I consciously adapt my marks, perhaps my pen, and the amount of detail that I'm trying to draw to be effective for each of those depths of plane. And the big problem I had in the first drawing was that I didn't do that enough. By using the one pen, I put too many marks, I think, too quickly, and made too much darkness all behind that front white tree. And that created a very shallow effect. And I think a lot of my foliage end up just looking too much the same. So when you look at them side by side, see if you don't think that I've created more variation in the way that the foliage that's attracting or catching the sunlight looks. because there certainly is a lot of variation in what's in the reference. I have the advantage of knowing how these trees and shrubs look much closer up as well. We're pretty much finished. What do you think? I would love to hear which one you prefer. So, well, now, a few adjustments, being very careful with the edges. What do you think of those last adjustments? Do you think they help? Do they add to the sense of depth and variety of value over our drawing? Now though, we'll compare them side by side and see which one brings out this sense of depth and of clarity in what we're looking at more effectively. Let's have a look. Here we have my finished drawing. Rather than compare it with the reference, let's compare it with that first drawing. And here it is. What I particularly was a bit disappointed with in this drawing was I felt like there was generally just too much darkness in this section. There wasn't enough variation between the various depths of plane from the front to the midground to the background. I wanted to create a slightly lighter effect with the lines. Now, I did use the same pen for all of this as 0.3, whereas I did switch from a 0.3 to a 0.2 to a 0.1 for different parts of this. I thought my shading here, my hatching on this whitish tree in the front, was a little bit heavy-handed and that it wasn't actually white enough for the effect that we have here. Possibly it's still a little dark, but I also wanted to be able to bring out the bark a little more, just the effect of the bark falling off, which I think worked here. And also the fact that in here we do have in the arm, or perhaps more the elbow of this branch coming out, we had darker shade being cast there. I tried to get a little more variation in my lines and the direction of the lines, and also a little more subtlety in these tops of the various bushes that are catching the light. And I wanted to keep my absolute furthest back section lighter. And that particularly was something I wanted to do, to have a bit more of a jump from here to here visually. As I did in this drawing, I added some leaves along the top as if coming from branches reaching out towards us, because that means we start seeing depth very much closer here, which means the effect going backwards is greater. The question is, which one do you prefer? I feel like I improved with my second one because I had a stronger focus as to what I was trying to do. And that's the advantage of drawing a second time. I would love to hear in the comments whether you think the first one or the second one works better for you as a representation of our reference. G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I hope you found this interesting. It was interesting for me, and I'll repost this reference in case you'd like to have a go drawing it yourself. But hey, whatever you draw, however you draw it, whether you draw it once or twice or 3 times, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.